15 Golden Age actors that vanished from the spotlight after one hit role. What happens when the dream you've chased your whole life turns into the very thing that chains you down? For some actors, that one breakthrough role, the performance that should have been their ticket to immortality, became their greatest curse. Instead of freedom, it locked them into a prison of typecasting they could never escape. In this countdown, we're uncovering 20 stars whose entire careers were defined by a single character, leaving them forever trapped in someone else's shadow. And wait until you hear about the actress from one of the most terrifying films ever made, whose unforgettable role as a monster was so convincing that Hollywood refused to see her as anything else. Her story isn't just tragic, it's a haunting reminder of how fame can seduce you with glory, then cage you in a role you never asked to live in forever. George Lazenby. George Lazenby. Imagine being a complete outsider, an Australian model with no real acting experience, suddenly handed the keys to the biggest movie franchise in the world. That's exactly what happened to George Lazenby when he replaced the legendary Sean Connery as James Bond in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, 1969. The pressure was crushing, the expectations brutal. Everyone assumed he would crash and burn. But here's the twist, he didn't. Lazenby was actually good. The film earned praise, and critics admired how he brought a vulnerable, more human side to the otherwise invincible 007. Tall, athletic, devastatingly handsome, he had it all. The studio was so impressed they offered him a contract for 7 more Bond films. It was the golden ticket: fame, fortune, and immortality. And then came one of the most infamous missteps in Hollywood history. Lazenby's manager, convinced that the swinging spy era was over, told him Bond was a dying fad in a world of hippies and gritty realism. Taking that advice to heart, Lazenby grew out his hair, grew a beard, and showed up to the film's premiere looking nothing like James Bond. Worse, he publicly declared he was finished with the role. In that single moment, he turned down millions, and the chance to be a legend forever. His career never recovered. For decades, he drifted through small TV roles and low-budget films, remembered only as the guy who walked away from James Bond after one movie. A decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. But as shocking as Lazenby's downfall was, it pales in comparison to the story of another actor, one whose monstrous role clung to him so tightly, it followed him all the way to his grave. Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi. When the world thinks of Dracula, one face rises from the shadows: Bela Lugosi's. Before 1931, vampires in film were grotesque, inhuman monsters. But Lugosi transformed the legend forever. A Hungarian actor who had already conquered Broadway in the role, he brought to the screen a dark elegance, an aristocratic charm that was as hypnotic as it was terrifying. With his piercing gaze and thick, magnetic accent, Lugosi didn't just act the part, he became Dracula. For an entire generation, he was the Count. The film's success was explosive, catapulting him into overnight stardom. But his triumph was also his prison. Hollywood could no longer see the man behind the cape. He was chained to the image of the vampire, typecast again and again, condemned to play nothing but ghouls, mad scientists, and shadows of his former glory. While Boris Karloff, his co-star as Frankenstein's monster, escaped into diverse roles, Lugosi remained trapped in the coffin of horror. As the years passed, the films grew cheaper, the scripts weaker, and his star dimmed. Struggling with illness and addiction, he drifted to the margins of Hollywood, working with the infamous Ed Wood on some of cinema's worst productions. Yet even in decline, the legend clung to him. When he died, by his own request, he was laid to rest in his Dracula cape. It was the ultimate symbol of a man who could never escape the role that made him immortal. A haunting, poetic end for the actor who gave Dracula his soul, and paid the price with his own. But while Lugosi was trapped in a frightening image, our next star's downfall came from something entirely different. Her dazzling beauty opened the doors of fame, but it was that very beauty that would lead to her shocking and tragic fall from grace. Veronica Lake. Veronica Lake. In the early 1940s, no star shined brighter. With her signature peekaboo hairstyle, long blonde waves falling seductively over one eye, she became an instant cultural phenomenon. Women across America rushed to copy the look, and men couldn't look away. On screen, she was magnetic, a tiny figure at just 4 feet 11 inches, yet commanding every frame with smoldering mystery. In films like This Gun for Hire and The Blue Dahlia, often paired with Alan Ladd, she embodied the ultimate femme fatale, dangerous, sultry, unforgettable. For a few glorious years, she ruled Hollywood. But her meteoric rise came with an equally devastating fall. Ironically, it began with that famous hairstyle. During World War II, so many factory women imitated her peekaboo look that it became a workplace hazard, hair catching in heavy machinery. The US government asked her to change it, and she did. But the moment the locks came off, so did her allure. Her box office power dimmed. Worse still, whispers spread through Hollywood that she was difficult, combative with directors, icy with co-stars. Soon, studios stopped calling. The once untouchable star was left stranded, her fame evaporating before her eyes. Life after stardom was brutal. Failed marriages, financial ruin, and private battles scarred her final years. The world was shocked when a reporter found her not on a glamorous set, but serving cocktails in a New York hotel. A brief comeback flickered, but it never reignited her career. At just 50 years old, Veronica Lake was gone, a haunting reminder of how swiftly Hollywood can crown and discard its queens. Her fall was slow, bitter, and tragic. Yet, if Lake's story is one of a femme fatale undone, our next tale is about a man who once played the strongest hero on earth, only to discover how powerless fame can truly make you. George Reeves. George Reeves. Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, he was Superman. To millions of children growing up in the 1950s, Reeves wasn't just an actor on a TV screen, he was the embodiment of truth, justice, and the American way. On Adventures of Superman, he carried himself with strength, kindness, and a fatherly warmth that made him one of television's first true superstars. Week after week, kids across the nation rushed to their sets to see their hero soar, and Reeves embraced that role off-screen as well, making countless public appearances and dedicating himself to the young fans who saw him as larger than life. But behind the cape and the smile was a man trapped by his own legend. The role that made him immortal also became a prison. Hollywood refused to see him as anything but Superman. His dream of being taken seriously as an actor or director slipped further from reach with each passing year. Even when he landed a role in the acclaimed film From Here to Eternity, audiences reportedly broke the illusion, shouting in theaters, "Look, it's Superman!" His scenes were cut down, his ambitions crushed by the very character that made him famous. Then came the tragedy. In 1959, just days before his wedding, George Reeves was found dead in his own home. The official report declared it suicide, blaming despair over his stalled career. But those who knew him best never accepted that story. Whispers of foul play, conspiracy, and unanswered questions have haunted Hollywood for decades. His death remains one of the industry's darkest mysteries, a shadow over the shining legacy of the man who once symbolized America's brightest hero. George Reeves became a legend for portraying a fictional hero. But the next figure on our list was no actor. He was a real-life hero whose single performance earned him something few in history could ever claim. Harold Russell. Harold Russell's story remains one of the most extraordinary in Hollywood history. Not because he was an actor, but because he wasn't. He was a real-life World War II veteran whose courage would forever change the movies. In 1944, while training troops, a defective fuse caused a rocket to explode in his hands. In an instant, he lost both of them. Fitted with a pair of steel hooks, Russell faced the unthinkable with quiet dignity. That resilience caught the eye of legendary director William Wyler, who had seen him in an Army documentary about rehabilitating wounded veterans. Moved beyond words, Wyler cast him in The Best Years of Our Lives, a film about 3 veterans returning home and struggling to rebuild their lives. Russell played Homer Parrish, a sailor coping with the very same injuries he bore in real life. His performance was raw, unpolished, and breathtakingly real. In one unforgettable scene, Homer's fiancée helps him prepare for bed, exposing the intimate truth of his new reality. Audiences didn't just watch, it pierced their hearts. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences recognized that power, doing something unprecedented. They awarded him an honorary Oscar for giving hope and courage to veterans everywhere, convinced that as a non-actor, he could never win competitively. But then came the shock. On Oscar night, 1947, Harold Russell stunned the world by also winning Best Supporting Actor. The only person in history to earn 2 Oscars for the same performance. And yet, unlike so many who taste Hollywood glory, he chose to walk away. He returned to a quiet life, devoting himself to veterans' causes, content that his story had already been told. Harold Russell was the movie star who never sought stardom. the man who won 2 Oscars in a single night, then gracefully disappeared from the screen. And while Russell stepped away, our next actress also won 2 Oscars. But her decision to leave Hollywood was far more shocking and far more mysterious. Louise Rayner. Louise Rayner achieved what only a select few in Hollywood history have ever done. She won back-to-back Academy Awards for Best Actress. First in 1936 for The Great Ziegfeld, then again in 1937 for The Good Earth. Practically overnight, the German-born actress became the toast of Hollywood, celebrated for her beauty, talent, and undeniable star power. She seemed destined for a glittering, lifelong reign as cinema's queen. But the crown she wore was heavier than anyone imagined. They call it the Oscar curse, the belief that winning Hollywood's most coveted prize can sometimes destroy the very career it was meant to secure. And Louise Rayner is often remembered as its very first victim. After her historic victories, expectations soared. Yet MGM, her home studio, had no idea how to handle their 2-time champion. Instead of masterpieces, they fed her a string of lifeless pictures that dimmed her brilliance. To Rayner, the studio system felt like a gilded cage, more concerned with glamour and publicity than true artistry. Then, in a move that stunned the entire industry, she did the unthinkable. At the absolute peak of her fame, she walked away. She broke her contract, left Hollywood, and retreated to New York, declaring that fame was shallow, destructive, and ultimately meaningless. She would never again return to the spotlight in any lasting way. Over the decades, she appeared only in a handful of scattered roles, living a quiet life of her own choosing. Louise Rayner passed away in 2014 at the remarkable age of 104. Her story endures as a reminder that for some, the greatest prize is not the golden statue, but the freedom to choose your own path. Rayner abandoned the glitter of Hollywood, but our next actress would go even further, trading the roar of movie sets for a life of stillness, contemplation, and devotion. Dolores Hart. Dolores Hart. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, she wasn't just another pretty face in Hollywood. She was a star on the rise, with the world at her feet. A golden-haired beauty often compared to Grace Kelly, she had the kind of talent and presence that promised a dazzling career. At just 19, she made her screen debut opposite Elvis Presley in Loving You, 1957, becoming the first actress to ever lock lips with the king of rock and roll on screen. She reunited with him in King Creole and soon lit up both Hollywood and Broadway, even earning a Tony Award nomination. She was engaged to be married, adored by audiences, and poised for greatness. By every measure, Dolores Hart had it all. And then, everything changed. During the filming of one of her movies, she experienced a profound moment of clarity, a spiritual awakening she could no longer ignore. Though she had tasted the glamour of fame, her heart was being pulled elsewhere. Her Catholic faith, quietly growing within her, became impossible to deny. In 1963, at only 24 years old, Dolores stunned Hollywood by breaking off her engagement and walking away from stardom. She turned her back on premieres, flashing cameras, and fame, and instead embraced a life of prayer and devotion as a Benedictine nun at the Abbey of Regina Laudis in Bethlehem, Connecticut. Today, she is known as Mother Dolores Hart. For more than 6 decades, she has lived in the Abbey, trading scripts for scripture. Yet she never completely severed ties with the industry she once conquered. Every year, from inside the convent walls, she still casts her vote as a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Her extraordinary journey even inspired the Oscar-nominated documentary God Is the Bigger Elvis. Hers is a story unlike any other, a woman who truly had everything: beauty, fame, love, success, and gave it all up for a higher calling. A story of conviction, sacrifice, and faith that continues to inspire to this day. But while Dolores Hart found peace in a life of prayer, our next actress would discover that one iconic comedic role brought her anything but joy. Jean Hagen. Jean Hagen. If you've ever watched the legendary musical Singin' in the Rain, then you'll never forget her. As Lena Lamont, the glamorous silent film star cursed with a voice that could shatter glass, Hagen delivered one of the funniest and most unforgettable performances in Hollywood history. That shrill, nails-on-a-chalkboard Brooklyn accent wasn't just a gag, it was the very heartbeat of the comedy. Vain, scheming, and utterly clueless, Lena was a perfect parody of old Hollywood's obsession with image over talent. Hagen stole every scene she appeared in, earning an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress and cementing her place in film history. It should have been the role that propelled her to superstardom. Instead, it trapped her. While Singin' in the Rain turned Gene Kelly, Donald O'Connor, and Debbie Reynolds into icons, Hagen's career curiously stalled. She was almost too good as Lena Lamont. Audiences and casting directors couldn't separate the actress from the irritating character. Before that film, she had built a reputation as a serious dramatic actress. Afterward, the serious roles vanished. She found a second act on television, shining in the hit sitcom Make Room for Daddy. But even there, she left after 3 seasons, reportedly frustrated with her part. The momentum never returned. For the next 20 years, her career dwindled to the occasional guest role or small film appearance, a heartbreaking contrast to her early promise. And as if fading stardom wasn't cruel enough, Hagen's later years were marked by serious health struggles. She passed away in 1977, gone far too soon. Her story remains one of Hollywood's most baffling tragedies, an actress who gave one of the greatest, most brilliant comedic performances of all time, only to watch her career evaporate. Jean Hagen's genius was undeniable, but it went largely unrewarded. And while she left us laughing, the irony of her fate is nothing short of devastating. Oscar Levant. Oscar Levant was never just an actor. He was a storm in human form. A virtuoso concert pianist, a gifted composer, and one of the sharpest wits Hollywood ever saw, Levant brought brilliance and chaos in equal measure. On screen, audiences loved him as the sardonic, perpetually neurotic best friend, the man with a cigarette in hand, a sigh on his lips, and a punchline that cut to the bone. His most iconic turn came in An American in Paris, where he played Adam Cook, Gene Kelly's cynical pianist pal. He stole scenes with biting one-liners, then stunned the world in a dazzling sequence where he single-handedly performed every instrument in an orchestra. But here's the truth, Oscar Levant's screen persona wasn't an act. Off-camera, he lived in the shadow of his own troubled mind. Long before it was acceptable to speak about mental health, Levant laid his struggles bare with brutal honesty. "There's a fine line between genius and insanity," he once quipped. "I have erased this line." That mix of brilliance and self-destruction made him a magnet on talk shows and game shows, where his dark humor and unpredictability kept audiences riveted and producers on edge. He was never cast as a leading man, never the matinee idol. Instead, Hollywood slotted him into the same type of roles again and again, the cynical sidekick, the neurotic friend. As the years passed, his battles deepened, and Levant pulled away from the silver screen. He poured his restless energy into books, essays, and rare TV appearances, where his unfiltered wit and painful honesty turned him into a cult figure. Oscar Levant was a true original, an artist whose genius was inseparable from his torment, a man who lit up Hollywood while never quite belonging to it. His cynicism became his calling card, his brilliance a double-edged sword. And yet, for all his pain, he left behind a legacy that was as unforgettable as it was unrepeatable. But if Levant's trademark was biting cynicism, the next star on our list became famous for the exact opposite, for bringing to life one of the most wholesome, beloved characters in movie history, a role that would forever define her. Donna Reed. For millions, Donna Reed will always be Mary Bailey, the devoted, steady heart of It's a Wonderful Life. In one of the most beloved films ever made, she was more than George Bailey's wife. She was the anchor of the story itself, embodying warmth, decency, and the soul of small-town American values. That role etched her into cinematic history and forever branded her as the symbol of wholesome motherhood and unwavering devotion. And yet, Reed was no one-note actress. She proved her stunning range by winning an Academy Award for her unforgettable turn as a good-time girl in From Here to Eternity. Still, Mary Bailey's shadow was so powerful that it followed her everywhere. As her film career slowed in the late 1950s, Reed reinvented herself on television with The Donna Reed Show. For 8 successful seasons, she charmed audiences as Donna Stone, the picture-perfect suburban wife and mother. For a new generation, she became America's ideal mom, a role that seemed like an extension of Mary Bailey herself. But the very image that made her beloved also became her cage. Hollywood couldn't see her as anything but the eternal nurturer, leaving her frustrated and sidelined as meaningful roles grew scarce. By the 1980s, Reed attempted a high-profile comeback on the hit soap Dallas, but the experience was rocky, and she departed after just 1 season. Today, she is remembered most for that luminous performance in It's a Wonderful Life, a role so iconic it both crowned and confined her career. Donna Reed was typecast as the perfect woman, her legacy sealed in the glow of Mary Bailey. But while she embodied grace and devotion on screen, The actor who comes next embodied something entirely different. The epitome of cool, a dancer whose moves carried him straight to an Oscar in one of Hollywood's greatest musicals. George Chakiris. George Chakiris. In 1961, West Side Story burst onto the silver screen like dynamite, rewriting the rules of movie musicals forever. At the fiery heart of it all was George Chakiris as Bernardo, the fierce, magnetic leader of the Sharks. With his smoldering good looks, razor-sharp dance moves, and undeniable presence, he wasn't just acting, he was embodying cool itself. Audiences couldn't take their eyes off him. His performance was electric, a showstopper that earned him both the Golden Globe and the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. At just 27, Chakiris stood at the peak of Hollywood, an Oscar-winning star in one of the greatest films ever made. His future seemed limitless. Hollywood tried to capture Lightning twice, thrusting him into big-budget films alongside heavyweights like Charlton Heston and Claudia Cardinale. He played everything from a heroic Mayan king in Kings of the Sun to an Italian race car driver. The roles were glamorous, the productions grand, but the magic of Bernardo proved impossible to recreate. None of those films ever matched the explosive success of West Side Story, and Chakiris found himself forever in the shadow of his defining role. As the 60s faded, so did the offers. By the 1970s and 80s, he had shifted to television, appearing in countless popular shows, but the era of leading man glory was behind him. Eventually, weary of Hollywood's fickle spotlight, Chakiris stepped away from the screen altogether. He reinvented himself as a jewelry designer, crafting elegant sterling silver pieces by hand, a quiet second act, far from the glitz of red carpets. For a time, he was the coolest gang leader in movie history, etched into cinematic memory. But while Chakiris was defined by a tough guy role in a musical, our next actress would be defined by a role in a thriller so shocking, so controversial, it forever altered the course of her life. Tippi Hedren. Tippi Hedren. Before Hollywood knew her name, Tippi was already a dazzling fashion model, her face gracing magazines and commercials. Then came fate. Alfred Hitchcock spotted her in a television ad and instantly decided she would be his next creation, his new Hitchcock blonde, following in the icy, elegant footsteps of Grace Kelly. He cast her as the lead in his 1963 horror masterpiece The Birds. It was her very first film, and it nearly destroyed her. The infamous attic scene, where Hedren is viciously attacked by birds, wasn't a trick of Hollywood magic. Hitchcock insisted on using live birds, hurling them at her day after day. They clawed at her skin, pecked her face, and left her physically battered and emotionally shaken. Yet through the terror, Hedren delivered a performance so raw, so haunting, it made her an overnight sensation. She was brilliant as the glamorous socialite trapped in a nightmare, and audiences were spellbound. Hitchcock cast her again in Marnie, his dark psychological thriller, and signed her to an exclusive contract. But that contract soon became a prison. According to Hedren, Hitchcock's behavior turned obsessive and controlling. He made unwanted advances, issued chilling threats, and reminded her that her career was his to make or break. When she finally refused his demands, his revenge was merciless. He locked her in the contract but refused to cast her in films, and he blocked other directors from hiring her. By the time she broke free, the Hollywood momentum that had once crowned her the next great star was gone. Her A-list career, sabotaged before it truly began, might have ended there. But Hedren refused to be defeated. In an extraordinary second act, she devoted her life to animal rights, founding the Shambhala Preserve, a sanctuary for lions and tigers. She transformed her Hollywood nightmare into a lifelong mission of compassion. Tippi Hedren's story is one of talent, triumph, betrayal, and resilience. Her career was stolen by a powerful director's obsession, but her legacy endures, not just on screen, but in the wild, where her spirit still fights for the voiceless. Roddy McDowall. Roddy McDowall's career began with the bright promise of a child star, but it was a role hidden beneath layers of latex and fur that cemented his legacy. In the groundbreaking 1968 sci-fi epic Planet of the Apes, McDowall became Cornelius, the gentle yet fiercely intelligent chimpanzee archaeologist. The revolutionary ape makeup crafted by John Chambers stunned audiences, but it was McDowall's artistry that breathed life into the illusion. Through heavy prosthetics, he delivered a performance alive with nuance, his eyes flickering with compassion, his voice carrying wisdom, his body moving with quiet dignity. He made audiences believe a chimpanzee could wrestle with humanity's greatest moral questions. The film became a cultural juggernaut, and McDowall its hidden heart. He adored the role so deeply that he returned to it time and again, portraying Cornelius's son Caesar in later sequels and even leading the short-lived television adaptation. In many ways, he became the very face, or more fittingly, the ape face, of the franchise. Yet therein lay the irony. His greatest success was also his greatest disguise. The world knew Cornelius, but far fewer knew Roddy McDowall. Though he continued to work tirelessly, appearing in hundreds of films and television shows, he was never able to fully escape the shadow of the apes. A respected character actor, a cherished Hollywood friend, and a gifted photographer, he remained beloved, but the stardom he tasted under that mask never returned. His story is a rare paradox. The role that made him unforgettable also kept him hidden, forever binding his name to a world ruled by apes. But while McDowall's fame was concealed beneath prosthetics, our next star's striking good looks were his greatest asset, until a single personal choice set him on a collision course with the entire Hollywood system. Lew Ayres. Lew Ayres. In 1930, he became an overnight sensation with his unforgettable role in All Quiet on the Western Front. The film, a raw and haunting portrayal of World War I through the eyes of a young German soldier, shook audiences to their core. It swept the Academy Awards, taking home Best Picture, while Ayres' sensitive yet powerful performance was hailed as nothing short of brilliant. With his striking looks, undeniable talent, and quiet charm, he seemed destined for a long reign as one of Hollywood's leading men. He cemented his stardom by stepping into another successful franchise, winning over audiences as the heroic Dr. Kildare in a series of hit films. But just as his star was burning brightest, history intervened. When World War II erupted, Ayres faced a choice that would alter his life and career forever. Haunted by the horrors he had once portrayed on screen, and guided by his own unshakable convictions, he declared himself a conscientious objector. He would serve his country, but he would not carry a gun or take a life. At a time when patriotism was measured in firepower, his stance was seen as outrageous, even treasonous. Overnight, the public turned against him. Movie theaters banned his films. Studios, terrified of the backlash, shut their doors. Ayres was blacklisted, his glittering career shattered. Yet he refused to betray his principles. Instead, he served bravely as a non-combat medic and chaplain's assistant in the Pacific, risking his life to save others on the battlefield without ever pulling a trigger. When the war ended, America's view of him began to soften. Slowly, cautiously, he rebuilt his career. In 1948, he earned an Academy Award nomination for Johnny Belinda, a reminder of the brilliance that had first made him a star. But he never reclaimed the Hollywood throne he once held. Instead, he became a respected character actor, a man remembered as much for his courage off-screen as for his talent on it. Lew Ayres was proof that principles can cost a man everything in Hollywood, but also earn him a place in history. His stardom dimmed, but his integrity never wavered. And while Ayres lost the spotlight for standing by his beliefs, our next story is about a child star whose one perfect performance became so iconic, she chose never to chase fame again. Mary Badham. Mary Badham's story is one of those rare Hollywood tales that feels almost like a fairy tale. At just 9 years old, with no acting experience whatsoever, a little girl from Alabama suddenly found herself stepping into the shoes of Scout Finch in the 1962 classic To Kill a Mockingbird. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. As Scout, the curious, tough, and open-hearted daughter of Atticus Finch, Mary became the very soul of the film. Through her eyes, the audience saw the world, innocent, questioning, and yet fiercely brave. She was natural, witty, and full of wonder, delivering a performance so remarkable that she earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, becoming the youngest nominee in that category at the time. Overnight, she was whisked from small-town life to Hollywood's brightest stages, flown to the Oscars, introduced to the world's biggest stars, and embraced as the new darling of American cinema. Along the way, she forged a lifelong bond with Gregory Peck, who became a second father to her long after the cameras stopped rolling. And yet, fame never truly called to her heart. Despite memorable appearances, including an unforgettable episode of The Twilight Zone, the glitter of Hollywood felt strange, almost alien, to a small-town girl. So, Mary made a choice that shocked many. She walked away. She returned home to Alabama, finished school, married, and raised a family, trading red carpets for a life of quiet purpose. As an adult, she dedicated herself to art restoration and education, far from the spotlights. But she never left behind the legacy of To Kill a Mockingbird. Today, she travels the world not as a star, but as a witness, sharing the film's timeless message of tolerance, empathy, and compassion. In doing so, Mary Badham reminds us that sometimes the greatest role you'll ever play isn't on the screen, but in the way you carry a story forward for generations.